Good morning, everybody. My name is Carlos Furty with the Toronto Transportation Club, and I'm very excited to welcome you to the first North American Transportation Club Alliance event. The Alliance was launched by 5 transportation clubs representing Chicago, Los Angeles, Toronto, Montreal, and New York to ensure their members and customers have greater reach and networking opportunities across North America. Now, this is our first joint event, and we are over 500 registrants strong. If you aren't already, please consider becoming a member of your local club. That'll help them continue to offer networking and educational events and keep you connected to your supply chain partners. And of course, be sure to follow the NATCA on social media to learn more about other initiatives that we're going to be offering members. So today's format for the panel, we've got an exciting panel to be followed by a question and answer period. During the panel, if you have a question, simply click the Q&A button, type in your question, and we will be moderating those. We will do our best to get to as many of the questions as possible. If you haven't already used that chat function, we recommend you do so to introduce yourself. And with 5 clubs coming together, we want to know where you're all from. So we'll now launch a poll asking you to identify your home club and keep that open for approximately 20 seconds. Again, if you aren't a member, we do encourage you to connect and join your local club. So that poll is going to be launched now. And if you folks wouldn't mind just voting along the bottom of your screen, letting us know which of our 5-member clubs you're joining us from today. Looks like we have Toronto out to an early lead, Chicago and other non-member in a close race for second, Montreal floating, as well as a number of guests from New York and LA. And we're going to close that up there. Looks like Toronto with 32% of respondents in first place. Go Leafs, go. That's an NHL reference for those of you who aren't familiar with Canada's national sport. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our presenting sponsor for this afternoon's joint virtual webinar from Position Global. It's founder and chief storyteller, Mr. Scott Case. Scott.
Thank you so very much. And it's great to be coming to you from Chicago for those of you who are fans of hockey and Original Six City. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the transportation clubs which have come together to present this event today. It is really impressive. Supply chain and logistics are a nationwide, in fact, a global issue, and bringing together Canada and the US to discuss this is very important. Position Global was founded about a decade ago. We are a marketing and branding company focused specifically on the needs of logistics companies and people adjacent to the sector. I am a licensed U.S. customs broker and also was an IAC security coordinator and FMC qualifying individual for a privately held company here in the Chicago area for nearly 20 years before starting the company. And we help companies out having to communicate, which has become even more critical in the last 2+ years of the pandemic, making sure that people are aware of really fast moving situations in terms of regulatory, market conditions, pricing, whatever it happens to be. So if your company is in need of communicating externally with your stakeholders, we do content, we do websites, we do social media management, audio, video production, and being from the industry, we get it 85% of the way there with the last 15% coming from within inside your building. Thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce our company. You can visit us online at position.global and download a press and media kit to learn more. And I'm looking forward to the session today. Thank you very much. Carlos, back over to you.
And again, a huge thank you to our presenting sponsor this morning / early afternoon, Position Global. Mr. Case, thank you very much. Like any event, our sponsors are really the ones who allow us to bring this industry together and put on these types of events. We're very fortunate to have a fantastic list of sponsors from all over North America. So firstly, a big thank you to the likes of Montreal Gateway Terminals, Port of Montreal. We've got a number of other ones as well. Odyssey Innovating Logistics, and then of course our supporting sponsors, Bison Transport, CN. We've got Edna Rice Recruiters Inc., Port of New York and New Jersey, Track World, TrailCon, and TTX. And you can see them all on your screen again. Premium sponsors, Montreal Gateway Terminals, Port of Montreal, Odyssey Logistics and Technology Corp., and our supporting sponsors, Bison, CN, Edna Rice Recruiters Inc., Port of New York and New Jersey, Track World, TrailCon, and TTX. So again, thank you very much to our sponsors. This kind of first-rate panel does not happen without you folks. Now, I'd like to hand things over to our moderator, Mr. Mark Saccone, the executive editor of the Journal of Commerce. Mark joins us today from Washington, D.C., and he was very quick to point out that he is actually in Washington, D.C. Mark, how are you?
Good morning. Pretty good. It's obviously a busy day for containerized supply chains after nearly an 18-month surge of elevated imports. And while some folks, we may be seeing some headlines and some publications saying that the container shipping crisis is easing, I can say from the reporting and what we're hearing at the Journal of Commerce, it's not. The growth of US import volumes is slowing on a year-over-year basis. But the container lines, ports, forwarders, and shippers we speak to don't expect an significant improvement in port cargo flow until late 2022. The thinking now is that a combination of inflation, higher interest rates, and a gradual shift back to a more normal balance in consumer spending between goods and services will reduce import volumes. It's important to remember, though, that North American container shipping systems are stressed out and even maxed out in some areas. In such environments, small disruptions can have outsized impacts. And there's plenty of ways that things can get dicey over the next couple of months. China is on high alert regarding COVID infections at its major ports, and severe winter weather in North America deal a blow to inland rail hubs. But in the meantime, we're going to be hearing from some of our panelists about what they're seeing in the market and how they're preparing for the coming year. Our first speaker, I'd like to introduce Chrissy Large, import manager of Conair. Chrissy, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark.
So
good morning,
ocean
everyone.
reliability is in the teens. There's been a doubling of trans-Pacific sailing times. Carriers are failing to honor space allocations within service contracts, sometimes due to port congestion, or sometimes just because that higher paying spot cargo somehow finds a way. You know, with all that in mind, what's been your biggest challenge as a logistics manager this year, or actually just now?
So basically our biggest challenge, again, is just finding the space sometimes at reasonable prices. So we do have 9 carrier contracts, which usually cover all of our volumes. But unfortunately, as you know, in this environment, you know, we've had to look outside to different freight forwarders. We've added a lot of service providers to our mix. We've gotten creative on which ports that we use. I mean, generally we used New York and LA and railed boxes into Memphis for our South Haven facility. So we actually have added Mobile, Savannah. We're always open to looking for other ports. We have some containers coming into Oakland now. So basically we're just trying to, you know, we've expanded the amount of ports that we bring cargo in through. Just try to be creative and find some different ways to get our goods to our distribution centers to be able to service our customers.
Okay. And I imagine you obviously, if you haven't completed or you're in the midst of kind of service contracting, are you facing pressures in terms of getting your minimum quantity commitments expanded? Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's fitting into your next year's plans?
Sure. So, I mean, it's being, the negotiations are kind of running similar to as they were last year, where, as you said, none of the carriers really want to expand. You know, they don't want to increase our MQCs. A few of them have, depending on where they've shifted their services. So for instance, One High, which used to be only a West Coast carrier, now is increasing their services to the East Coast instead. So they're looking for customers who are looking to use the East Coast services more, which we have to, you know, we're kind of split half and half. So that actually works out, you know, to our benefit. So hopefully we can get some more capacity out of them this year. You know, we've reached out to basically every other carrier who we have not, who we currently don't have a contract with. And to be honest, most of them have told us they're not open to any new contracts, that they're just trying to service their existing customers and they're not adding anyone else to the mix right now.
So are you going to have to lean in harder on some of your NVO partners?
I think overall, I think we are going to have to use them as part of our strategy, which never was before. It was always kind of a backup. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, just to be able to have some more space in your back pocket, so to speak, that, yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to make some agreements with some of the MVOs to be able to service all of our needs.
You noted adding Savannah and Mobile to your routing. You know, we're seeing a lot of the carriers, not in service contracts, but also in terms of their service networks, adding more East and Gulf Coast capacity, partly because some of the pressures that we've seen over the last 18 months, but also within mind the ILWU contract expiring as well. So that definitely gives you a little bit of a hedge there.
Yeah, I mean, we started, some of the carriers will give us the rail capacity through Savannah that in realm to Memphis. But I mean, as we've seen over the past few years, the carriers don't want to move any containers inland, right? They want to stop them at the port and then get them emptied and back so that, they can fill them up and ship them again. So there's really been kind of a stopping of, they don't want to sign up for any of the rail inlands. I mean, obviously we all know with LA, with all the containers, I mean, we used to move the majority of our containers through LA to the rail to Memphis. And obviously we had to cut back on that drastically. We're using a few services that have expedited, a few carriers have expedited services. But we had a lot of containers stuck out there in terminals for a long time. And that ended up being kind of a disaster for us last year. So we had to change our strategy.
Are you considering, or is that pushing you toward transloading at all?
We're also doing transloading as well. Yeah, so we have, we work at bringing containers to LA and New York, stripping and transloading. Basically South Haven is our biggest challenge because it's in the middle of the country. So that's our biggest pain point. So yes, we are bringing containers into New York and LA, and actually CMA is starting a service into Wilmington, North Carolina next month. So I think it's a trial run for a February sailing into March. And starting in May, there's, I guess if everything runs well, they're going to start a new service there. So, I'm always looking for other ports that don't have congestion to try to ease the pain in the others.
Right. Well, I imagine within your company, your profile has risen, whether factors out of your control. Can you talk to me a little bit about kind of how you're communicating what you're seeing and what you need from the C-suite, particularly as supply chain becomes just as critical this year as last?
So, we're actually, our volumes are, our volumes increased about 1,000 containers for this year. And somehow managing through all this, I mean, the company is doing better than we ever have. So we're doing something right. But I really think it's just a testament to just being creative and just looking for alternatives and not, getting stuck into we've always brought stuff into LA and New York and we're just going to continue to do that. So, you really need to find, alternatives, or we have a lot of containers coming out of Southeast Asia, which is even a bigger challenge. So we've actually approached carriers and said, we're getting space through our NVO under your from you're the carrier, but we're paying 3 and 4 times. So what can we do to come up with, some type of premium rate, to be able to get our containers moved under our contract where, we have extended free time and it's just just works better for us. So some of the carriers were very willing to, give us a new premium rate, which was somewhere in between, an old rate and an NVO rate. So at least that, saves a few dollars here and there.
So my last question, because we're kind of rounding up at the end of our time, are you expecting this year to be more chaotic than last, or chaotic in different ways, or maybe even just a little bit slower?
I expect more of the same, to be honest. We're kind of, as you've said, I don't think anything is going to slow down until, the end of 2022, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that's obviously going to depend on how the ILWU contract negotiations go and what type of wrench that might throw in everyone's plans.
Very good. Well, Chrissy, thanks again and good luck out there, and thanks for the chat.
Thanks so much, Mark.
All right, so turning over to Mario Cordero, Executive Director of Port of Long Beach. Long Beach has experienced intense import pressures over the last 18 months, forcing it to think and act more creatively in the short term. In fact, the Journal of Commerce reported earlier this week that the ports and container lines were discussing a plan to incentivize carriers to load more containers than they discharge. So Mario, can you tell us what's the state of port flow, and what are some of the levers that you've been able to pull or are pulling to help with this flood of volume?
Well, Mark, thank you for the question, and you presented to the group a good synopsis. in terms of the state of the supply chain. So for the nation's largest port complex here, the Port of Long Beach and of course, Los Angeles, I think everybody will agree that this is a global crisis when we talk about supply chain. So when you have a crisis at the level that we have, of course, that is more apparent at the nation's largest port gateway. So some of the things that have evolved, of course, is through the involvement of the White House that we welcome and the assignment of the envoy, John Bakari. We've been able to get a group of stakeholders, key players, and have meetings every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, going back to, November, early November, and start figuring out, how do we address some of these issues? Now, let me just say this. Keep in mind that this gateway for 2021, to get over Los Angeles, we moved in excess of 20 million TEUs. So the good news is we've been able to move that cargo in a way that it's been nonstop, so to speak. And but on the other hand, as has been referenced, we have some congestion and bottleneck issues. So the surprising thing for us, particularly the Port of Long Beach, is not that in this gateway we moved 20 million. To break that down, for Long Beach about 9.4, Los Angeles around 10.5. That volume is not surprising, Mark. As you know, if you go back a decade, this was forecasted. Mm-hmm. What is surprising is that we're still talking about some of the issues that we've talked about in the last decade. So the good thing that has evolved as a result of this crisis is that, we're having substantive conversations in terms of some of the measures that we need to take. You mentioned one. We have capacity constraints that were dire here in the fall. The good news is with regard to the loaded imports that were at the terminals 9 days or more, long dwelled containers, we've been able to make tremendous progress in this gateway to the tune of almost 60% reduction of those long dwelled containers. That is, as you kind of implied, in reference to the contemplated fee that we thought of implementing, which we haven't done as of yet, only because of the progress. So suffice to say that, again, this has brought us to a point of talking about truck turn time, gate hours. And as you know, the Port of Long Beach back in the fall, we talked about 24/7 operations. In fact, Mark, you may recall when I was chairman of the FMC, I made reference to that. Now, granted, 24/7 is not something that you pull a switch and happens. But the good news is in 2022, as opposed to back in 2015, there's a good, vibrant discussion about extended gate hours that need to be had, flexibility, and of course, this 24/7 framework. So in conclusion, I think what has been brought upon us is we can no longer just debate and talk about some of these issues. We need to have substantive finding resolutions so that we could now address a supply chain issue that, again, really starts at the ports of origin. And as you mentioned, it's going to be continued uncertainty because of Omicron. China has a zero tolerance for COVID. If one of those ports of origin closes down, it's going to have repercussions. But the good news is, this will be my last commentary, the good news is part of the reason we're having this volume of surcharge is, of course, in the USA, we have a great economy, 5.7 GDP growth, consumer spending. So that's a big factor in terms of why we're in the situation we're in.
So Mario, can you expand a little bit more? Because I think, when we heard from President Biden last year, kind of providing some encouragement for 24/7 operations, there was this sense that, we would flip on the switch and all of a sudden things would be rolling. But you and I know that there's a lot of different pieces that come together. Importantly, the consignees or the shippers need to be extending those hours. When it comes to moving toward those 24/7 operations, what can the Port Authority actually do besides kind of bringing those parties? Is there other ways that you can nudge these folks forward?
Yes, and I think we've done that in terms of some of the embryonic stage that we're in with regard to that. So, as I mentioned, the ports of origin, they're 24/7.
Okay.
So I think for us here at the nation's largest gateway, when you move 20 million containers, needless to say, you can't do that in the normal course of operation in terms of the gate hours that we're accustomed to. So what we have been able to do as port authorities, and here at the Port of Long Beach, one of our terminals, TTI, They moved forward in the fall with a pilot project, a 24/7 pilot project. In January of this year, CMA at its terminal in the Port of Los Angeles announced a 24/7 pilot project. That's progress. Now, granted, is it working full-fledged? It's not. But are there efforts and movement towards now addressing this solution in the long term or midterm? Absolutely. The conversation now on 24/7 is vibrant. I've talked to many BCO executives and carriers and stakeholders. Everybody is open to it. Everybody believes this is what needs to happen. And as you mentioned, Mark, the challenge right now is how quick could it happen? But the good news is there's vibrant conversation about this framework today.
Very good, very good. Now, obviously looking at a lot of port flow metrics, people focus on the number of ships at anchor, but for me, it's always been really important to look at the street chassis terms, the terminal dwell times, the truck turn times, and the rail dwell. When we're looking at those metrics through Southern California, Mario, are we seeing anything improving? Are they flatlining? What should shippers and carriers, be thinking about in terms of how Southern California is handling, at least in the first quarter?
Well, some of those metrics are kind of flatlining, as you've referenced. In fact, all the issues you just mentioned, Mark, are issues we've been talking about for years here. So part of what we're trying to address at this time is we've addressed the loaded imports. We have a good percentage of empties. And let me give you a number. For the Port of Long Beach, about 47% of the containers at our terminals are empties. Now, to put this into context, what's the normal circumstance? Usually about 30%. And the same for Port of Los Angeles. They have an elevated empty percentile also. So I think the question right now for us is in terms of how we improve the metrics. Now, chassis, on the one hand, that's an ongoing dynamic and has been. On the rail drill, that's much improved. If you recall, some months back, it was at a standstill here, no rail cars. So thanks to the cooperation by BNSF and UP, the Class 1 railroads, we made a lot of progress with regard to rail movement, which is, again, a very key factor for the Port of Long Beach going forward, how we amplify on-dock rail capability. Now, in terms of ship dwell, because of the backlog that we see, again, that goes back to the capacity constraints that we've had at the terminals. Now, the good news is, I think when you talk to most of the terminals here at the San Pedro Bay complex, the capacity constraints have improved. So it's a step-by-step approach. There was no expectation you'd have a quick resolution to anything. However, query whether or not if we did nothing, that is, if we didn't have a conversation with the stakeholders and we didn't roll up our sleeves, we would be in a much worse situation. So more to come with regard to the innovation here that's occurring here at the San Pedro Bay complex.
Mario, thank you so much. And one more question for you. I mean, how has what you've seen in the last 2 years adjusted or propelled kind of Long Beach's long-term plans, given not only the volume, but also this understanding of when there's a certain volume surge, how different assets within the supply chain slow, and thus you lose that capacity that they can. Any larger thinking in Long Beach's long-term role?
Yeah, great question, Mark. And it's two-pronged. Two come to mind. Number one, our continued investment on-dock rail. The good news about the 24/7 conversation, a lot of focus is on gate and truckers, but the fact of the matter is we could do a lot of movement of containerized cargo rail 24/7. That's a much simplistic potential solution because the Class 1 railroads are totally on board with that. So the more that we're investing on-dock rail, and as you know, the Port of Long Beach just received, or we were the beneficiaries of a $53 million grant from Merit with our next project, the Grand Endeavor, or the enhancing of the Pier B Rail Enhancement Facility. That will eliminate 750 million trucks when this project is done from the roads and expedite movement by rail. So number one, investment in rail and amplifying on-dock movement here. Number two, the one we were just addressing, expanded gate hours. So again, to be very simplistic with regard to a 24/7 framework for the long term in terms of what we believe will occur here. if you're a trucker, would you rather pick up a container at 5 in the morning from the terminal or at 9 or 10 in the morning? I think no matter what port gateway you talk about, most of us are in a metropolitan setting. The answer is very clear. I'd rather pick up that container at 5 in the morning so I could go to the Inland Empire or Kern County or Riverside County. Now, and we're taking incremental steps to get there. So those are the two areas that I think long-term for Long Beach, it's a priority of a focus.
Very good. Mario, thank you again for joining us, and good luck out there, and we'll be talking soon.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. So, well, a lot of the attention has been on Long Beach and LA congestion. There's been congestion at US and Canadian ports. And now, while it's definitely not to the extent that we're seeing in Southern California, Port of Vancouver has also been grappling with some issues with about 6 to 7 ships awaiting berth. Some of those freezing temps and snowstorms have kind of pushed back that recovery after Vancouver was actually cut off from the interior BC due to intense flooding and rain. Dan, we've got you on the line here. Thanks for joining us. And, obviously winter is always a wild sport for railroading in the BC, but this year it seems particularly crazy. What's CN doing in terms of helping to kind of restore fluidity, particularly as volumes are elevated both for US and Canadian shippers?
Thanks for the question, Mark, and thanks to the NATCA for inviting me here today. And really, it's two stories here. One is pre-washout, and one is post-washout. And I'll kind of just say, up until we had the unfortunate washouts in BC South, we were clean at every port. Our dwell was down to a very respectable level, and we were serving quite well every vessel that was able to get to berth, and there were no lineups. I'll just kind of give everybody a little bit of a perspective on what we're dealing with here. The washouts were from November 13th to December 4th, 21 days. And on December 4th, we were able to open back up. But it was a slow ramp up for about 7 days because you need to inspect the rail as you pass over it and make sure that your repairs are strong and safe. From December 11th to December 17th, we were doing a good job. We were catching up. We were eating into the backlog, and then we had a derailment on our Edson sub on December 17th. Further to that, there were snowstorms in Vancouver, which are not normal, from the 26th until December 31st. But the biggest thing for us on trying to catch up here is on December 23rd, we entered at some point in our Western network into tier 2 restrictions. And so what everybody on the call or on the group here today can understand, that's minus 31 degrees Celsius somewhere in the West, or minus 24 Fahrenheit for our American friends, to try and understand the amount of cold that we've been dealing with. And the cold really impacts the train's ability to brake and pass air from the front of the engine to the back of the train in order to have braking power. So I think today we're hoping to have our tier restrictions lifted, which means it's like we're going to start decongesting. We're going to start picking up velocity, and we're going to start getting to the places we need to get to. And you notice while I went through that message there, I didn't mention COVID at all, but the Omicron virus is also having an impact on some of our staffing across the country as well. So from time to time, we're running into some crewing issues there. So it's been a real tough run here the last week. Last year we had a tough February operating. It was extremely cold during February. Our customers will remember that. But we're hoping that we can get a nice little run here of warmer weather. We can get the trains moving. I think from a big picture standpoint, with blanks that we're already seeing in the schedule, the fact that there's some congestion in Vancouver, there's large congestion, as Mario talked about, and Chrissy talked about in Long Beach. And I think the virus is having its issues on some Asian ports. I think what we're going to see is maybe some more blank schedules here in months ahead that'll probably assist in us catching up and getting back to normal status. So I'm very optimistic that the CN team of railroaders are going to be able to get some warm weather, get out there and get moving, and we'll catch up.
Now, of course, though, Dan, with the threat with those blanks is that if there's volume, that volume can then build up, and then we've got another bullwhip snap. Now, with those kind of disruptions, we've seen, particularly in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot more appetite for transloading, both on the import and export side. I'd be interested to get a sense from you, like what's been driving that interest, and what are the advantages that an importer and exporter get? Because, on the face of it, you're adding more moves, but this is a unique environment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and I'm speaking from the Canadian West Coast perspective. I know that there's long established transload infrastructure in LA Long Beach that's been doing this for a little while. In the Canadian West Coast, and I'm just using round numbers, the IPI discharge was around 70%, and the local discharge was around 30%. I don't think up until the washouts that it was a rail inland issue that created this transloading. In fact, I'm pretty positive this was more about what Chrissy alluded to, is the ocean carriers wanting their box at the port, flexibility, get back on the ship, get back to Asia, and go grab more import cargo. My view on this is really, I think that and I'm sure that's, the ocean carriers do that through their ocean agreements, and they are, either incentivizing or doing what they can to try and keep that box at the port, which unnaturally pushed the amount of local cargo in Vancouver above 40%. And when you push that local cargo in Vancouver above 40%, you don't have the natural facilities, trucks, chassis, CY facilities. You don't have that ability there to absorb that kind of a surge, and hence why we saw all of this local cargo kind of back up in Vancouver. I think from our domestic standpoint, we are seeing a lot more loaded 53s. We're pushing a lot more empty 53-foot boxes from our western points into Vancouver, and it's been strong there. Still, we need to get more boxes there, especially now during the cold weather. We're struggling to make sure we keep that pipeline primed. But I mean, it's a sign of the times, and it's a sign of the future. Outside of the existing transload network in Vancouver, which will be expanded, and we work really well with some established partners in that area. Prince Rupert has a major investment going on to build more logistics capability in and around their terminal. Instead of being a primarily IPI terminal, they're going to have import transloading, and we do that to a small extent today, and it's growing. We also think that Alberta, Calgary has a great opportunity, as you can be fed by two ports into Calgary. The box doesn't stay at the port, but it's close, and you have the ability to up the amount of transloading within Alberta. It is a sign of the future. I think supply chains are going to try and find contingency inland as much as they are from a port perspective, and it's something that we're prepared for, and we're ready to move on.
Very good, very good. And Dan, are you seeing any slowdown in terms of some of the on the container side in terms of the international volumes? No, I mean, I can't really. We won't feel anything from Chinese New Year. We see the ships that are at berth at both ports, at both Rupert and in Vancouver. We see the demand, we see the volume on the dock, and we just got to put our heads down and just push through this as hard as we can, and hopefully get some good weather. I mean, we can be prepared for a surge when the weather is a little better and it's not minus 30. Right. But to your point earlier about there could be another bow wave coming right after. I think if the weather's nicer, we'll be in a much better position to attack that, and I think we have the plan and the assets and the people to do it. Very good. Well, best of luck out there, and thanks for joining us, Dan. Thank you. All right, so we heard about transloading, and transloading obviously can be a key part in the segment right before our last mile delivery. And while we've seen a lot of last mile growth driven by traditional e-commerce, we've also seen more retailers and importers going to direct to consumer. So here with us is Noah Hoffman with C.H. Robinson. Noah? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Trevor. Noah, I'm sorry, I flipped you guys. Noah, do you want to throw on since I gave you the intro?
Not a problem. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can. Sorry,
All right.
Trevor, just a second. Sorry for the confusion there. So Noah, telling me what's really driving, I mean, we've seen a lot of last mile growth, and obviously that's e-commerce for the last 2 years and us and you and everybody else ordering. But what has been the challenge from the shipper side in terms of getting that capacity?
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark, and great question. So here to share some of those trends. At Robinson, we serve many industries, and specifically in this final mile space, we can consult over 7,500 retailers of various formats, sizes, and shapes, and really significant growth in complicated last mile needs. Given that we see various levels of demand that continue to take shape from real simple solution needs to the most complex. So, it's one thing, as I go through some of these trends, it's important to call out that there's been a significant investment into parcel and final mile service delivery from many companies, Robinson included. So when we really think about the vast majority of the attention in the last mile space is around speed and availability. A lot of it points back to understanding the requirements and timings of different types of commodities that you and I and all of us on this call purchase, and how fast do you really need them. Certain commodities, perishables, those types of things, you want them quick, 15 minutes, 2 hours. Like the advancements that have been made there are significant. And some things we can wait 3 days, 7 days for. The demand driven by e-commerce growth and the pandemic driven purchasing behaviors have made some of the most complex challenges out there. So to meet the consumer demand, leading brands and retailers are executing strategies to either fulfill from stores or fulfill from urban fulfillment solutions, delivering goods from locations closest to the consumer. So the trends that I guess I'd call out that are most notable, maybe not in any particular order, but the local crowdsourcing continues to be a popular tactic that increases available delivery capacity, both for peak and off-peak seasons. It's been highly impactful for parcel size deliveries, but less impactful for big and bulky, because there's fewer qualified contractors handling requirements, crossing thresholds, going into people's homes during these times is a bit unique versus the challenges of yesteryear. So to note, that the supply of drivers for short haul jobs are more than fully recovered and then some since the economic shutdown, due to the natures of the opportunities that are out there for final mile, the short haul, high dense routes, and obviously the lifestyle advantages that come with that compared to maybe long haul trucking or trucking jobs that would take you off the road for, or take you away from home for a significant amount of time. I'd also point out that there's been a transition in capacity planning to really supplement national parcel players. There's kind of that where the leading brands and retailers kind of compete and battle over capacity availability constraints and GRIs, where a lot of tech and investment and advancements that allow brands and retailers to shift to regional or local parcel players and those that are using local crowdsourcing options. For example, at Robinson, we bundle contracts for retailers and large brands to balance both national relationships and supplement regional needs where they can meet.
Are these regional parcel players folks that are coming into the market, or have they always been there and it's been technology that's kind of finding that capacity?
Yep, both.
Both.
I mean, the simple answer is both. The investments in tech, aggregators and whatnot are really bringing it to life, where they were hard to access in yesteryear. the local or urban warehousing has been highly effective for, especially for positioning inventory and shifting strategy around, shorter cycle times and reducing costs, where are some of the most pronounced benefits there where they can be found. As far as direct to consumer capacity in that big and bulky, which I mentioned has been kind of an ongoing challenge. We've seen improvements there slightly through 21, but I think 22 will continue to be a challenge there, crossing thresholds, pandemic prevention measures and all those things will be a challenge as we look to find and retain qualified drivers for those types of things. Maybe one of more of the media attention grabbers is around autonomous vehicles and drones. There's, the last mile equipment purchasing is rapidly moving into EVs, electric vehicles. We do believe that long term, there's a ton of positive long-term potential for autonomous and drones in select segments of the value chain, but they have a long way to go to mature. So the capability of these solutions are more longer term and therefore maybe less relevant today in the near future. Seen a lot of, like I talked about, large investments. There's a lot of money coming in from private equity and venture capital firms, as well as a significant amount of M&A in 21. Acquisitions, I think, totaled over $3 billion in the final mile space in 21. And there was over $8 billion raised across 21 as well. And that's both raised for existing parcel providers, but as well as startups. And if you really dive into those investments, many of them are centered around regional carrier access, like you talked about, like how do I get at that capacity? And if you pick up most trade publications today, you come across an article that talks about the importance of regional carriers and the way to get access to them and how you can compound that into being a good strategy. But it's not a simple flip of the switch because without proper planning and implementation, shippers are on the risk of missing volume thresholds and therefore sliding down different pricing tiers with the national providers. So you can kind of damage your relationship or what you've built up if not done properly. The other area of the funding that we're seeing in the trends is around software as a service. So as you think about C.H. Robinson and our freight quote solutions, these softwares as a service are focused on saving shipping costs, really centered into small and medium-sized businesses that do have e-commerce presence. So there's a significant amount of investment going into additional services like freight cost auditing, visibility, reporting tools. And so the list of startups in that space as well is pretty significant. So if you sum it all up, over 12 billion pumped into the parcel space in 21, is a pretty telling sign that it's only the beginning, and there'll be further investments and advancements in 22 and 23. And to us, what this all highlights is the importance of diversifying the carrier base where possible, making sure you have the capacity plans, because there's a ton of options out there just to get about whatever speed and availability that you really need. And the important piece too is to really partner with providers in this space that not only provide the service, but also the knowledge to help guide to the best direction to meet the needs of your final mile supply chain.
How do you see dynamic pricing impacting last mile pricing? I mean, are we seeing that in that environment yet? Kind of like what we see in the LTL?
Both LTL and truckload from a dynamic pricing perspective. Yeah, I mean, when you think about speed, visibility, and access to that capacity, I mean, price and service are two things that need to be dynamic and available real time, especially for those environments where you want a 15-minute turnaround on some consumer goods or pharmaceuticals or fresh produce. It is definitely an area that we'll see made available throughout 22 here.
Very good. Well, Noah, thank you again for bringing us up to speed, and sorry for a little bit of confusion there, and best of luck. Trevor, my apologies, Trevor, we're bringing you back on. Sorry for the mix up there. There's been plenty of concern about US and Canadian vaccine requirements for cross-border truckers and how that would impact trade. Fortunately, we haven't seen significant disruption after the mandate took effect January 22nd. Prior to the mandate, many trucking companies took pains to ensure that their cross-border drivers were vaccinated. And while, Journal of Commerce has reported that things haven't been as bad as some feared, we both know that there's still plenty of tightness on the cross-border side and capacity pressures on the truckload and LTL. I'd be interested from you, Trevor, where in what lanes or regions are you seeing capacity the tightest?
Yeah, good morning, Mark, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone on the call. The tightness is, I'd say, across the network and in various forms. There's certain areas that will peak, and Dan spoke about the washout scenarios in British Columbia that had a ripple effect onto other networks as capacity moved into that market to attempt to support what was going on there. We're seeing it across our geography, which includes Canada, the US, and Mexico. Notably, since the start of the year, traffic from the US into Canada has become much higher in demand, and it's only been exacerbated. It was in anticipation, we'll say, of the vaccine mandate, and now we're feeling the real effects of that today, where there is simply just less drivers available to make those cross-border transactions than there was prior. It's been pretty well publicized. There's various estimates on how much capacity that is. The numbers of 10% of the 160,000 or so that move cross-border has been moved out there. Our fleet in preparation for this months ago started really pushing the communication and the promotion of vaccines, obviously within our organization, and then understanding what our capacity was going to be. Also, with relation to that, we put through the single largest driver pay increase for our cross-border drivers and owner operators that would do that sort of 7 to 8% for owner operators, 15+% for our company drivers that are doing that work. And so we did this proactively, and it's been a good strategy to this point, but it's still we're seeing tightness in our own networks and the ability to do all the work that we'd want to be able to.
How are your shipper customers, particularly those that are using you for routing through ports? How are they rethinking or looking at their inland delivery networks this year, given the capacity restraints we've seen over the last, say, 2 years?
Yeah, I'll maybe highlight 3 things that we're talking with our clients about in effort to be the best partner that we can be. And firstly, it's how do you create optimal solutions, and that's through collaborating on both priority setting and network options. So some of the fundamentals like flexibility and scheduling, which shipments have the most urgency to them, and making sure that they are prioritized accordingly. Being open to things like modal shifts, so whether that's intermodal or multimodal type solutions where they would be available. We've had success with a number of our clients in that fashion. Also availing our logistics capacity. We've got a considerable partner network that we vet carriers to work on our behalf. That our clients have become increasingly open to those options if we can provide that seamless service as an alternative. That's been a good solution. I'll say, secondly, and you can't avoid talking about it, is that you have to recognize the fundamental shift in cost that's occurring in our industry. We've had pressures related from parts, equipment, labor, obviously all moving upwards, and then you have this supply-demand dislocation that is persisting in the entire North American marketplace. You say these things are real and they have to be addressed, and then you add in some shocks like the washouts in BC, like vaccine mandates, and like absentee spiking across industries. Those things are real cost elements that we have had meaningful partnership style discussions with our clients to say, here's what's happening. For your awareness, let's talk about possible solutions that are available in this environment, and how we might implement them. I'd highlight as well, and it gets talked about, Mark, fairly often, to say, this type of environment can create situations for opportunists to step into the fold and try and take advantage of market conditions. And we're certainly aware of that out there. As I said, we're buying capacity actively in the marketplace every day, and so we are distilling between those who have a reasonable and medium to longer term view of this, and those who are just surely trying to take advantage of situations in a way that's not sustainable. And obviously, all responsible providers have to recognize the cost inputs that have really driven what's going on here today, and they got to be accounted for. Otherwise, that supplier is not going to be there to serve in the future. And so that's the balance that we've looked to achieve, and the kind of dialogue that we're having with our clients.
I'm sure you hear this a lot, or get asked this a lot, but this term driver shortage is quite a loaded term. When you hear that, do you truly believe that there's a shortage of drivers? Is a shortage of skilled good drivers? How would you characterize that? Shortage, scarcity?
Yeah, it's not as simple as a yes or no, there is or isn't, but I'll say there's absolutely real strain and pressure on this job. Noah referenced it, where this whole creation of final mile has created alternatives. The labor market tightening overall has played into it. And we as an industry, and that is together with our clients, we've got work to do to say, how do you make this job more and more sustainable over time? And again, part of the discussions with our clients through this period is to say, how do we take out some of the waste that is inherent or has been built into supply chains over time? And I mean waste of drivers' time, either at port or at the loading dock or at the distribution center. Like that's the stuff that is real friction and drives people out of the industry. And so we've had meaningful conversation around that. We've done lots of things around investment in trailer pools and really directing capacity to those who are working with us to create reasonable driving scenarios for all of our people. That said, this most recent wave has created still pressure on it. Like the back end of our customers' businesses or the distribution centers, they're facing that worker pressure, and so getting a truck, if it has to be live loaded or unloaded, turned around is challenging. We're seeing dwell times that are going up, and that's something that is hurting the ability for us to get on the other side of this. So there's that piece of it, Mark. And I would just add further, like, if we can say that there's a silver lining to any of this, when we have sort of shocks in the system, and it allows you to kind of reset, we've got to put the right value on the men and women that do the job of a professional driver. I mentioned the largest pay increase that we've ever done for our cross-border individuals. That's well deserved and needed. And if that can be a silver lining through this thing, that we can collectively recognize the value that needs to be attributed to that role, then there's some good that comes from this.
Very good. Well, thank you for the insights, and good luck this year. So we've got just a few minutes left, but we got some good questions from the audience, so I want to make sure that they get a chance. Our speakers get a chance. Mario, no surprise here. There's two questions looking for some kind of sense of where the ILW negotiations could be. What are you hearing, and what are you telling the industry in terms of are we going to have some hiccups here, or smooth sailing, or too soon to tell?
Well, I think the short answer is too soon to tell. However, to elaborate more on that answer,
please,
I can say that I know that both sides of this conversation, the Pacific Maritime Association and the ILWU, they know the seriousness of the situation that we're in. I'm talking about the supply chain and the impact on our nation's economy. So I have just a gut feeling that they're going to put their best efforts to make sure they come to the meeting of the minds and not have a protracted discussion. So that's the best answer I could give you, because again, obviously, the good thing about meeting with all the stakeholders with the leadership of the White House envoy, which includes the ILWU being at the table,
right,
there's a lot of good conversation and collaboration by everybody here to try to make things better. So that's the best scenario I could represent to you.
Okay, very good. Just a couple other questions that we had were kind of what happens, if LA and Long Beach increases their throughput to this attendee, it seems like that would just kick the volume down to the road to Chicago where there's chassis and capacity issues. I guess the question is kind of where is the systematic approach to kind of handling these volume surges? And any thoughts from our various speakers, and including you, Mario?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. And that's why I continue to move forward the conversation about the 24/7 framework, because the 24/7 conversations is about the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So that whether it's the warehouses, whether it's the trucking, whether it's the railroad, we have fluidity in the supply chain. And that's something that, again, as I said earlier, the good news about that is there's robust conversation among all the stakeholders with regard to what we need to do to have transformational change to the supply chain.
Very good. Well, Mario, thank you again. And thank you to all of our speakers for coming on for this virtual event and sharing what they're seeing and what they're expecting for the coming years. I'm going to be ending up my moderating duties and then turning over to our host. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your work this morning, early afternoon. And again, a big thank you to all of our panelists that joined us. Mark Saccone, of course, from the Journal of Commerce, for moderating today's event. And additionally, we would like to extend special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Position Global, and Scott Case. We do look forward to continuing the conversation and are excited to offer you, on behalf of the Journal of Commerce, a 10% discount on ticket purchase to the must-attend TPM 2022 supply chain event. That's being held in Long Beach, California, February 27th to March 2nd. The link and code details will be on your screen at the end of this in a few short moments, as well as in the chat box. So you'll be able to access that as well. Lastly, be sure to check out each of our member clubs' websites for future events and to follow the North American Transportation Club Alliance on our social media feeds. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and we look forward to connecting throughout the coming weeks through the NATCA. Thank you, and have a great day.